Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Geezerology Spotlight Wednesday. Um, Bob, his two daughters, Marissa and Morgan, and Dee on Thursday night went to see this film in a cinema called Live at the Bowl '68 Special Edition. This is a one-shot deal in theaters across the country for the Doors movie. And I'm just going to give you a little bit of a background on this movie, what it is, and then I'll turn it over to Bob, and then he can take over this discussion. But this is a concert that was filmed at the Hollywood Bowl in Los Angeles by the Doors on July 5th, 1968, which is pretty much 3 years almost to the day before Jim Morrison died. And this was filmed by uh, a fellow film student of Ray Manzarek and Jim Morrison by the name of Paul Ferreira. He put together a crew of 5 cameramen, and Bruce Botnick handled the sound recording. And they filmed this concert, and it went for several years. This was originally intended as part of a documentary that Ray Manzarek was going to put together on the Doors. Well, the documentary got scrapped, so the footage from this concert was just kind of chopped up and used in different music videos and promotional films over the years. And then in 1985, Manzarek and Botnick got together and put together this long form video called Live at the Hollywood Bowl, which was the original version of this movie. And this was an edited version of the movie. They didn't use the whole concert, but they just used pieces of the concert to put together this film, which also went with a soundtrack album that came out at the same time in 1985. And then in 2012, Ferreira, the photographer, got together with Botnick, and they put together the entire concert into a film. And this version of it was called Live at the Bowl '68. And this was released on DVD and home video. And this movie that we saw on Thursday night was this 2012 cut of the film called Live at the Bowl '68. But this was the video and the audio was all remastered and just made much better, and went on to the movie screens. And it also included some interviews, as I understand it, with John Densmore and Robbie Krieger. And I don't know, you guys can tell me this, but I don't know if these interviews were like put throughout the movie, or if it was a separate section of the movie or what. But these folks who saw the movie can tell you about that. But anyway, that's what this film was. Bob, take it away, brother.
All righty, thank you, Scotty. So, yeah, when I saw the announcement that this movie was going to be screened, for one night only across the country, I was excited to go because I have never seen a more or less continuous Doors concert. Obviously, I was too young to have caught them, before Jim Morrison passed and everything. So I was excited for that, and I threw out the idea of my two beautiful millennial daughters to accompany me to see some of the stuff that influenced their old man when he was a teenager. And so they graciously decided to go with me. So the three of us went Thursday night to one of the movie theaters here in the Kansas City area. I had a great time. I enjoyed it. I think they did too, based on some of the stuff that they talked to me about after the show. Especially Morgan. She's my country music lover, so I know this was definitely out of her comfort zone. So I really appreciated them coming with me. I got a chance to tell them how this music affected me when I was young. I explained to them about the Oedipal section in the end, and how I had a very rocky relationship with my dad, and how Jim Morrison had a similar thing with his parents. And I talked to them about I had an oversized bedroom in my home with my parents because my dad had renovated a garage into my bedroom, and I told them about how I would go in there and turn off the lights and listen to the Doors' first album and just revel in, the hypnotism of the music and everything. So they got to learn a little about the weirdness of their dad. You mentioned the interview with the two surviving Doors members. That was one of the things that I did not like about the screening. That was really a promo for the 50th anniversary reissue of the Doors' last album, LA Woman. And they played two songs off of LA Woman, when the Riders on the Storm and LA Woman, and they re-recorded them in the studio with Krieger and Densmore, a keyboardist and a bass player vocalist who was actually the son of Jerry Sheff, who played bass on the original album. And then, they talked a little bit about the LA Woman album, and they showed, the exterior of the Doors rehearsal studio where they did the album. So really it was a plug for the reissue of that LA Woman
It
album.
really had nothing to do with the Hollywood Bowl concert. Yeah.
Had really nothing to do with the 68 Hollywood Bowl concert. So I was a little disappointed. I thought it would have made for a better experience had they actually talked about this particular concert, what made it significant, and some of the stories behind it. But that's probably my only complaint, about the thing. But I enjoyed seeing more or less a continuous performance. And what for me was really neat was seeing those musicians on stage and the things that they did to make the sounds that I had heard so much on album. And I had seen various clips here and there, of the Doors on stage, but nothing ever to that length. And I recognized some of the clips from the movie. I remember the little grasshopper sequence and some of the other things. But like I say, this is the first time I'd ever seen it that in that continuous form. And I know this was done on DVD, but for some reason I had never gotten around to watching that. But anyway, that's kind of my first impressions. If anybody else wants to jump in, please feel free.
Morgan, did you like it?
It was definitely different. Like my dad had mentioned, is I'm not really into more of the older type of music, especially his genre. Actually never heard of the band before actually going to see the movie. So going into this, I was like, it's going to be kind of boring to me, in my opinion, that I'm just going to listen to an old rock band that my dad loves, but I'm not too fond of her. So actually getting into it, the beginning part was kind of cool to see some of the older players that are still alive today, and then going into it, listening just to the performance in general of this band was kind of cool, just because you don't see it in modern music today, as just looking at someone that's actually, a band working together and just actually performing using their own vocals and extra keyboard and stuff like that. It was a cool experience for sure.
Marissa.
I thought it was a blast to go with my sister and my dad. At first when I walked in, I haven't really listened to the Doors. I heard of them. I know who they are because my dad's like them. But when we first came in and I'm sitting there and I'm watching them in a older gentlemen, playing these instruments, I was honestly just wowed that they were able to move that quick. And that to be honest with you, and that was more of an entertainment for the first bit of it, just wow, these gentlemen really are passionate to the point that they have their craft just part of who they are, and I really enjoyed that. I would agree.
Can I interrupt? So the Krieger and Densmore stuff, that was at the top. That was at the beginning.
Yes, that was the beginning of the film.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that was at the beginning of the film, and then they had a little bit of an interview, and it wasn't super engaging, which I would agree with my dad that I think that it might have implemented a little bit better if it was correlating to the flashback of that concert, right? Right. But when I watched the show, it was a trip, because I wasn't honestly that into the show at first. I don't really know how to explain, my attention span couldn't keep up with what was going on until the band and everyone started to really get into it, and you could see the show progressing. So at first I was like, okay, old rock band, all right, they're singing really slow, and they say the same thing like 4 times in a row and like some of their songs. So I'm just like, what's going on? Like I didn't understand that like my generation's music is very like ADHD, where we have like, like things constantly happening, singing or something, something is going on. And what I found so interesting about the Doors was they allowed for you to feel and like almost forced you like engage with what was happening, the music, the aesthetics, everything. And I'm like, Dad, are these guys like all on drugs? They all look really into their stuff. And it definitely was a good show. I enjoyed it for sure. And the past 2 days I have been on a nonstop binge of like researching the Doors and Jim Morrison and the band members and their dynamics. So the more that I know about them, the more that I think back to that show, and I'm like, man, okay, I can see the dynamics of like all of them. Anyway, it was just really great. I loved it.
Dee, you saw it too, right?
I did see it back here on the other side of the state. Thursday, I brought Leslie with me, and there was all of about 20 people in the theater. So we had plenty of room to stretch out. And I'd been looking forward to it. And yeah, like Bob, I thought the intro was a little bit long, but I thought they would discuss more about the Hollywood Bowl concert. Now, that being said, I thought it was also an opportunity for Krieger and Densmore still to show their chops. They could still cut the notes. And I think they recorded that at, might have been Krieger's home studio, it looked like. So they cut it, and the son of the original bass player sang vocals, which was a little bit eerie, but it wasn't bad at all. I'm actually surprised to hear both Bob's daughters, Marissa and Morgan, to say it was, enjoyable and I guess somewhat educational in an odd way. That I thought maybe that they'd come away with a different take on it. But yeah, myself, we were both enjoyed it quite a bit. I had seen clips of it before. They had shown a couple songs from the Hollywood Bowl concert before, portions of the song "The End" and whatnot. But this was the first time I've seen them play "Hello, I Love You," which was a treat. And they hit all the notes. And I think that for this particular concert, since they knew it was going to be filmed by a good friend of theirs, Paul Ferrara, they wanted to be on their game. And I think most of the time they were. There was a couple shots of Morrison, and most of the attention was on Morrison, of course. And he does have that natural stage presence and charisma. But it just reiterated to me that how good they were when they were at the top of the game. And I think this film was definitely geared for hardcore Doors fans or rock and roll fans of a age. In the theater back this way, there was about 2 people that were under the age of 40 that I could see in there.
Bob, was your theater full?
No, I think we only had probably 10 people, maybe something like that. Does that sound right, girls?
I think there was more than 10.
You really? Okay.
Yeah, there were people there. I mean, there were people in every row going down all day. They were like sprinkled. There were people there.
Yeah. And I think my 2 were probably the youngest there. And I know the lady sitting next to me looked like she was maybe early middle age. And so it was a mixture of ages for sure.
It was weird.
Go ahead, Marissa.
I was just gonna say, coming from like a 28-year-old girl here, I immediately fangirled over this band. Like
Really?
Immediately when they showed pictures of the band in the montages during the interview at the beginning and then the show, I was like, man, these guys are attractive. They sing, they move when they play piano, like keyboard. I was immersed, and I was like, it took me back to like my dad's era when like all these girls were swooning over these men. And I immediately left the theater like, I want a poster of Jim Morrison on my wall. So like it was a lot of fun. Yeah.
Well, Jim Morrison, yeah, just to put it in perspective, at that time, that was pretty much at the peak of their performance. thing. Like I say, Morrison died like 3 years later, and it was a pretty eventful 3 years after this when he got busted in Miami, and there was all that stuff, and they couldn't go play anymore because concert venues would not have them because of the problems that they were afraid of. But this was pretty much at the peak of their performance power, and Morrison was quite a charismatic character, and he was a god. He was a god back in those days, and he continued to be a god to this day. People think that he was one of the most charismatic rock stars ever.
This was the first time that I had ever seen Doors concert footage of this size. I mean, everything I've seen has been like on a TV or a computer screen. So seeing them larger than life, Jim Morrison and their music came across to me as very hypnotic. I mean, I was really being captivated by him. And and he didn't have really that many theatrics here on stage. He was kind of subdued from a lot of the stuff I've seen. He did a little bit of his shaman dance, and he did a couple other things, but he was just a mesmerizing presence. And I really felt myself being drawn into him more than I probably ever had before. So that was my first exposure to that charisma and that shamanism, that he supposedly possessed. So this is going to sound very strange, but he was a beautiful man. I mean, and I don't say
that was part of the thing,
Yeah, but I mean, he was just a beautiful person.
Yeah.
And I could see how people could continually forgive him for all of the antics that he pulled, with people. So yeah, I was kind of mesmerized by it.
Dee, what was the most surprising thing to you?
What an
as
audience.
somebody who's a half a century long Doors fan.
I don't know. There wasn't really anything surprising because I had seen, portions of this concert before, but I will give a lot of credit to the cinematography and the audio in the sheer. It was absolutely crystalline. I mean, I know they remastered it, but it just brought it to a level where, every note of the keyboard you could hear. And I thought Morrison's voice was in full flower. I wanted to experience, a full concert with them. I had seen Densmore and Ray Manzarek and Krieger years before in another incarnation. But I think this was specifically for longtime Doors fans and our rock and roll historians. I don't think any attempt was made to bring in a younger audience. And, one thing Marissa said, she said that her generation tends to be ADD. I think part of that's technology driven because of the phones and the way that videos are cut. When the Doors did this, two of the members of the band were film majors, Manzarek and Morrison. So they knew exactly what they were doing, and they filmed it in a way they would, spend a lot of, 10 or 20 seconds on Morrison before they'd make a cut. And it was, there was no quick edits. So just as if you were experiencing that. So from that standpoint, I'm glad I finally got to see Morrison do a concert from start to finish. I was surprised that they opened the show with "When the Music's Over." That kind of was different, having a long form. But I think it was worth it, and they could have shortened the intro a little bit.
Yeah, and I was disappointed that I think that was not the full show, so I would have liked.
No, it was a full show.
That was the entire concert?
Yes, it was. Yes.
It felt like really.
Yes.
Okay.
And what's also interesting, the way they did a sequence of songs was exactly the way they did it on Absolutely Live album. When they went through Backdoor Man.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, that's it. So that was
Backdoor Man and 5 to 1, an Alabama song. Yeah.
Yep. Exactly.
So now this, I have this DVD. It's called the Doors Collection. I don't know if you can see that, but this has the original cut of it, the 1985 cut on it, which is the edited version of the concert, and it's it's in low resolution. It's just a good thing to look at historically. It's definitely not as good and as pristine as clean as you saw, but but that what you saw was the full concert.
Okay. Well, in his recent autobiography, Robbie Krieger devotes a chapter, to this concert and to the filming of it, and he has some interesting little anecdotes that I'll throw out here real quick. If you're watching the video, you see this wall of amplifiers behind the band, and those were all donated to them by the acoustic company, and they allowed them to use them for the concert for promotional purposes. So in his book, Krieger talks about how, they're getting ready to do the show, and not long before the concert was supposed to take off, an official from the city of LA showed up with a decibel meter, and he's listening to their sound check going, okay, you guys are too loud, you're violating code. So they started unplugging amps, and nope, you're still too loud, so they unplugged more. Nope. So finally they're down to just a handful of amps, and the guy finally says, okay, you're within code. So this big wall of amps were just there for show because they couldn't use them. And he also said in his book that normally when they did a show, they didn't have a set list. They just kind of went with how the crowd was reacting. And he said a lot of times on their shows, you could see them, they'd all gather over to the drum riser and go, hey, what do you want to do next? And he said this one, they actually did kind of have a set list, and they put in rehearsal time and everything in advance because they knew this was going to be one of their official, video documentaries of a show. So they actually did put some prep time and stuff into this one. And then, he talked about the lighting, and they had to light the stage for the cameras. And there was one scene in there where Jim Morrison is asking them to turn down the lights because they're getting ready to do the end. And obviously, I guess he wanted a subdued lighting to fit the mood of that song. And he keeps asking, hey, come on, man, turn the lights down, turn the lights down. And then at one point, you see Morrison turn his head off to the right. And then he comes back and then says, yeah, okay, we can deal with it. And, he had turned his head because Ray at the keyboards is going, Jim, they can't turn the lights down. They're filming it, So just some little anecdotes that I would have liked to have seen that kind of stuff, maybe being interviewed with the two survivors before they started to film.
On this DVD, Manzarek and Krieger and Densmore and also Bruce Botnick, the sound engineer, do a audio commentary over it. And a couple of those things that you were talking about, they said they also pointed out that when they were putting the video and the audio together, you see it at the beginning, Manzarek there, and he's got his white shoes and he's tapping his foot with his white shoes. And they said, they were talking about how you can really see that, how you really see that white shoes. Well, what they did, they used that as a metronome when they were syncing up, when they were putting it together and they were syncing up the video and the audio. They were using Manzarek's white, tapping of his white shoes. They were using that as the timing device to sync up the audio and the video together. So I thought it was pretty funny. One of the five people who were filming that, one of the five cameramen was a young film student at UCLA named Harrison Ford, later known as Han Solo and Indiana Jones. He was one of the photographers on that movie.
I heard that.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Okay. Dan mentioned earlier about starting the show with when the music's over, and I thought that was kind of a different song to start with, and I think that they normally use that as a closer or toward the opening ends. But anyway, one thing that really struck me was when they pause and when the music's over, and we're all waiting for Morrison to scream out, "We want the world and we want it now." and everything has come to a pause. And we all know that's what's coming. And everybody's just kind of waiting and waiting. And Morrison gets that little smile on his face. And it's just, and really got caught up in a moment of waiting for that. and I flashed back to my youth and to what a lot of their music said to me back then, and when I was 17, and hearing Jim Morrison scream out, "We want the world and we want it now." And, they got the guns, but we got the numbers, and it just spoke to that whole youth rebellion and the spirit and optimism that I had, back in my youth. So I was sitting there in my seat, just kind of waiting, like, come on, Jim. Come on, Jim. Let's do it. Let's do it, man. We want the world and we want it now. And it's like, yes. So.
Well, I like the absolutely live version of that, where he's coming up to that, and it's just a little Manzarek is just doing a doo 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 leading up to it, doo doo. It keeps doing it, doo doo, and everybody's waiting for that moment when Morrison says, "We want the world and want it now," and then all of a sudden Morrison grabs a microphone and he screams, "Shut up!" Give me some room. Shut up. He told everybody, shut up.
Give the singer some.
Give the singer some. Right. It was pretty funny. Morgan, you have anything to add?
I'm not really. I've just been listening to what you guys have been saying.
Marissa?
Nope, it was really great hearing my dad sing. Yeah, that was really cute. Definitely a fun experience.
You were the first person ever heard it was neat hearing my dad sing.
Oh, I loved it. I loved it.
You went through this whole exercise just to get to that moment where your dad would sing a Doors part, right?
I just seeing his foot tap and his smile, his mustache coming up and singing, like that was something I'll hold on to.
Yeah, I felt restrained because I had a stranger sitting right next to me, so
D, anything else you want to chime in with?
I think I hit most of it. Well, there was a side note at the theater. We had just sat down, and then 2 rows in front of me, which was empty, a guy comes up, and he's about my age, over 60, goes, "Hey, did you ever see him in concert?" And I said, "Not exactly. I saw, when they had like their own version of it." And he says, "Man, I saw him, blah, blah." I said, No. I said, "No, that was not the Doors." I said, "What you saw was a cover band."
Yeah, go ahead.
Then after the movie's over, he gets up with and I said, "Well, what did you think of it?" He goes, "I like their hits, but I don't like that long stuff where he just talks and talks." He was meaning like when the music's over in the end, or he's doing more spoken word. So that was.
I love that part of it. Like that was a really cool part. And the more that I was looked into the Doors and like the dynamic of Jim Morrison and like what he was really passionate about, his poetry, and the discord that brought with music labels and people actually wanting to listen to their songs. That makes a lot of sense. So I just want to add that in there.
Hey, Dan, do you remember last year when they did a similar thing with the Doors tribute movie? It was one of those things where they did one night only across the country.
Yeah, I saw that too. Yeah.
Yeah, I know you and I, again, went to that at the same night. And I was thinking earlier, I believe that was the last movie that I saw in a theater before the pandemic lockdown, because I think it was like February or real early March of 2020.
Yeah, it was.
This is the first movie I've seen in a theater since the pandemic hit. So I began the pandemic with the Doors, and I'm sort of kind of ending it.
What was the one last year? What was that one?
It had, again, interviews with Krieger and Dinsmore interspersed through it, and then it had
interspersed through what? What was it?
Well, it was the musical part of it had various performers doing Doors material, And I think a lot of it was at the Hard Rock Cafe. And then wasn't it like a special tribute thing that they did in LA about the Doors? Help me
Yeah.
if I'm remembering incorrectly here, Dan.
No, and parts of it, I was led to believe that it was you were seeing a live performance on some of them. So
Yeah.
I don't know how you could pull that off, but I guess like with, direct satellite. But yeah, they had various artists perform Doors songs, and I thought it was in recognition of the 50th anniversary of LA Woman coming up.
I remember back when I was in my when I was in Northern Virginia, this would have been right around the turn of the 90s, late 80s, early 90s. And there was a band that was playing around Washington, D.C. a lot back then called the Back Doors, which was basically a Doors tribute band. I went and saw them one night. That was pretty good. It was about the same time the Oliver Stone movie came out. And yeah, it was pretty good. I mean, they did their best, especially the lead singer did his best to do to look and sound as much as he could like Morrison, and it was pretty interesting for somebody who always wanted to see the Doors and never was able to. That was a pretty good nostalgia trip when I saw that. God, that's 30 years ago. Holy crap! So it's time to go see another one. Well, okay. Well, thanks for joining us, everybody. That was fun. Thanks for telling me all about what I missed. I couldn't get there on Thursday night. So come on back next week. Bob and Dee and I next week are going to talk about this little obscurity from the middle 70s called Phantom's Divine Comedy, which is this little mysterious thing that happened, an album that came out where a guy was pretending to be Jim Morrison and released this sort of this satanic ritual wizards and everything album. So we're gonna review that next week on Geezerology, and we'll be back on Sunday with Geezerology Gazette. We'll be back on Friday with a review that one of us will do. Thanks, Morgan. Thanks, Marissa. Thanks, Dee. Thanks, Bob. So long, everybody.